One thing we don't do too well with in Australia is money handling. Our credit rates are rising. Everyone seems to have a credit card or 17. And between mortgages and buying things before you can actually afford it, we're in a bit, well, not a credit crisis, but there's certainly a fair weight of credit on our shoulders here in Australia. Our money mentor joins us now, Mr. Matt Hern, to tell us how a young person can manage these finances so that later in life you've got enough bucks to enjoy yourself. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Jason. G'day, Anita.
G'day. Now, all those things that Jason mentioned, now being a young person myself, sort of, most people just sort of look at it and think, nah, I'm still young, I'll just sort of, all the money that I sort of, you know, earn now, I just put it towards travelling or going out and, you know, having a good time. Like, how important is it? Like, those things that Jason said, I would be like, I haven't even started thinking about most of them. And
you're not alone. In fact, it doesn't seem to stop once it starts, that type of thinking. So I meet people in their 30s who still have that sort of thinking, and sometimes into their 40s where it's all about now, 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 and not for the future. And despite the fact that they've got their parents or their grandparents saying, if I only knew when I was young, or if I had my time again, I would do this. And in fact, there's research saying that if I had my time again, I would have started saving 20 years early. That's what current retirees are saying. So yeah, it's not alone thinking, but it's incredibly important to do that, because otherwise you end up like current retirees who are having to have a massive sacrifice of their lifestyle in order to just get through day to day.
What's the biggest weakness a young person sort of does when in relation to money and saving?
Well, the greatest weakness is everything's about now and spending now. And the thing is that today's young people, so people in, say, their 20s now, have come along at the same time when the credit became very, very easily acceptable. So before they had an ability to learn behaviours of restraint because the barriers were there, the barrier shifted. So they haven't had a chance, they're catching up against the barrier, and now we're seeing the consequences of that, where their lifestyle of spending outside of their means is catching up with them. So the thing is to start to learn that barrier and exercise that restraint of spending within your means early while you're young, before it becomes a habit that's hard to break, just like smoking, for example.
Now, one concept that you introduced to us very early on in the piece, which I had a lot of trouble getting my head around, was spending less than you earn. Now, why is that important for a youngster?
Well, it's important for everyone, and I know that we have covered it quite a bit in detail before, but it's really, really important for a youngster, because it's when you learn the behaviour, and also you're earning not very much. So you haven't got that sort of fat in your income levels that, say, people who are earning, who are later in life and higher professionals, they get by and they don't really track it, but they can make it up because next month they'll get a $5,000 income in their pay packet. If you're only earning $1,000 or $2,000 a month, that's really, really tough. So it's really important to track it and spend less than you earn in those early years.
I know a good thing with my younger brothers, they both did their apprenticeships, and when you're an apprentice you make next to nothing. I mean, I think it was $120 a week or something, first year apprentice. But they managed to survive through those 4 years, and they were smart enough to maintain the same spending habits that they had, even when they had the lower earnings. So, and that they ended up with you know, motorbikes and cars and all these things that they've paid cash for because they were so good at living on next to nothing. What's the problem then with parents who maybe over-support their kids?
Over-support by giving them too many opportunities, you mean?
Yeah, like I know I was raised in a fairly poor, well, not poor family, but working class with 4 boys running around. Obviously the finances were stretched, so we never had, you know, you want to buy some shoes, you go work, you go get yourself some shoes. But I saw a few of my friends where mum and dad maybe had a bit more disposable income and they just handed everything to them on a platter. Once they went out in the real world on their own, they sort of fell apart. Is that normal?
It's more common than perhaps otherwise, but the reality is it's like any behaviour that our parents teach us is that we learn by experience, in a sense. So if you've never tried to live off of your own means in the desert, then you wouldn't probably know how to. And the same sort of thing probably applies if you've been through an apprenticeship and you know how to do it, or a part-time job by going through university, then you've learnt some really good behaviours. And the trick for young people would do is, when they come out of that time, is resist the temptation to just blow everything that they get from that first massive pay packet, which is kind of what I did when I first got my graduate job. And resist that temptation and put a good portion of it aside. And the rule of thumb is, if you can, put 10 to 15% of your gross income, so your before-tax income, aside in a savings account, as a good rule of thumb. And if you do that all through your life, 10 to 15%. Now that seems scary, I know, because I could see just by your facial expression, Anita, but the reality is, most young people eventually perhaps see themselves going into a house one time. Now, that 10 to 15% is nothing compared to what you'll be paying off your mortgage down the track. So starting when you first earn your first pay packet with just 10 to 15% is a good easer into when you eventually want to pay off a house.
Right.
So
okay.
it's easing yourself into it, and also you'd put it towards a home.
Okay, what about these working students and stuff where, you know, they may only make a couple of $100 a week, if that, where, you know, they have to pay bills, maybe their boarding and stuff, they just can't put that much aside. What are their options? And they want to save.
Earn more.
Well,
No, if they're studying, like if they're at uni and they're studying full time, they're working maybe a couple of nights a week just to get by to pay the bills and stuff, but they want to save more. I mean, what can they do? Should I just wait, or?
Well, I'm guessing that the want to save more is possibly for a more, say, a holiday, for example. So
Possibly.
because at that stage, I imagine their mindset wouldn't be thinking about wealth creation. That's what they're studying for, to earn a regular full-time job when they're not full-time studying, perhaps. So the wealth creation might be put aside. So the saving really does come down to that discipline. I know we bang on about it all the time, that discipline of saving more. And if it is a really big holiday, one way to create wealth is to earn more income. So it could mean trading off and trying to get another job or a higher paying job to get some more income in. But if it's not feasible, then you really just have to live within the means. That's the option.
It's easier though, especially for a student if they're living at home, then, you know, before they even move out, even before their first job, they've got the opportunity, because they're at home, they don't have to pay bills or, you know, food or anything. They can save a little bit more, is that correct? So
absolutely.
They can start even younger?
Yeah, one of the tragedies that I see is that as society...
I'm just laughing because,
I'm still at home.
Yeah, but as society, the baby boomers are allowing their kids to live at home a lot longer than perhaps our generation.
There's even a name for them now, isn't there? Kippers, they call them.
Yeah, okay.
Kippers.
But like there'll be people staying at home and living at home until they're 30 and have been working full time for 8-9 years and still don't have enough for a deposit for a house and haven't started anything. So I see that as a bit of a tragedy, because they haven't taken advantage of the golden situation that they've had given to them. They've just the opportunity they've taken is to make sure that life was fantastic for all of those years.
Lots of
and then
shoes.
they're starting again from age 30. So that's a tragedy, in that the balance could easily have been shifted in their favour, and that if they had traded off a little bit, they might get to 40 and be able to be financially independent.
So should parents be setting better examples? I know when I was a little tacker, even when I was still at high school, we gave 25% of our income to mum and dad.
Oh.
Now that's going to come as a heck of a shock to some of these.
Is it going to come back to you one day?
Why?
I still owe my parents thousands based on what they spent on us. Bring it 25% of your income went to mum and dad. It's like board, yes.
Yeah.
But and then my brother started his apprenticeship. He started paying board, and and on it went. And you always had that choice. Well, if you don't like it, move out and see how much you have to pay. And I think that was a really good grounding. And frankly, I think kept my parents alive as well, because you know, again,
4 boys running around.
I know, 4 sons, all the different sports we all played, all the different medical
food
bills
that you would have eaten.
I know that we're really getting into some philosophical areas here, because this comes down to your belief systems. Like, if I was a multi-millionaire, would I spoil my children rotten and give them all the opportunities? Then probably, we want to do that as a society. So it's a real philosophical thing here about what advantages you want to do. But I think if you do want to give your children great opportunities and give them the chance to stay at home and all that sort of stuff, maybe instill some of the boundary setting in them as well. Like, you would maybe make them do their own washing, for example, so that when they get out of home, they know how to wash dishes rather than having get taught to iron like I had to.
I hope Mr. and Mrs. Tassoni are watching the show this morning. Mrs.
But yeah,
Tassoni,
it's all
do too much.
philosophical choices. No, yeah, that's a whole different one. My mum spoils me, and if I'd stayed at home, she would have too. So I would say that as a young person, maybe resist the temptation to push the boundaries big time and start saving it and instill good.
And if you're in that golden situation, make the most of that golden situation. Put the money away, don't just use up mum and dad. Yeah. I've got a very, very wealthy friend who said to me a very interesting thing, because I intend to be very wealthy one day, by listening to you, Matt. Now, he said...
Acting on what I do.
Yeah, he wants to have enough there for his kids to know that they can do whatever they want, but not enough to think that they can do nothing.
Yeah.
Which I think is perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of the very rich people in the world, like Bill Gates, has said exactly the same thing, why he's giving away most of his wealth.
Beautiful. And